Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Mr. Pandaria raiding guide, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the normal mode version of Immerseus in the Siege of Orgrimmar raid. Now in order to complete this fight you're going to want to bring 2 tanks, 2 to 3 healers, and the remaining a mixture of both melee and ranged DPS. Now for an introductory fight, it's quite fun. It's got its I don't know, nifty little abilities I guess they are, and it's not too hard, so I guess most guilds would be able to kill it and then progress on to the rest of the raid. Now first of all we're going to take a look at the positioning that might be of benefit to you during this raid fight. So as you can see around the outside of the room we've set up different markers in the video in the background, and these markers correspond to where certain players were going to stand. What you want to do is try and separate your players so that it goes something along the lines of a few DPS players, then a healer, a couple more DPS players, another healer, and then depending on how many healers you take, some more DPS and then another healer. We put both the tanks at the back of the room near the exit to the room, so on the opposite side to the entrance, because the boss does some tank swapping abilities that we'll just leave to the tanks to do over there out the way. He also has a few other abilities that we're going to take a look at now. Now Immerseus is a 2-phase fight. His first phase will begin at the very start of the fight, and you'll probably notice that he doesn't actually have a massive health pool. I think on 10-man normal mode it's around 61 million health. Now once you've killed him, so to speak, because 61 million isn't going to take long with the numbers people can pull these days, he will then enter phase 2. Killing him effectively causes him to split, and we'll talk about phase 2 later on in this guide. During phase 1, Immerseus will cast a few abilities at your raid, but not too many, and these are just kind of to give you a feel of the raid and the fight itself. There's nothing too worrying that you should look out for. Now Immerseus' first ability is called Char Bolt, and this will cause him to fire a bolt of char at everyone in the room. Now this will inflict a small amount of shadow damage to any enemy that gets hit by it, and it will also create a char pool at the targeted location. So this is unavoidable damage really. You're going to get hit by this char bolt. However, when the char pool is created underneath you, you need to move away from that as soon as possible, because just like standing in anything on the floor in World of Warcraft, it's going to inflict a small amount of shadow damage to you every second. Move out of it or your healers are going to moan at you. His next ability is called Swirl, and if you think back to Duramu the Forgotten in the Throne of Thunder, this is kind of like his Disintegration Beam ability, or if you want to think even further back, to the Temple of the Jade Serpent dungeon at the very start of the expansion. It's kind of like Wise Mari's phase 2. Now Swirl will cause Immerseus to kind of form a torrent of water in front of him, and he'll rotate himself around the room, hoping to knock players and also cause damage to them. You will take damage and get knocked back if you do get hit by this, so don't get hit by it. Additionally, while he is casting this, there will also be kind of water bursting out of the cracks in the ground and moving around as well, so players need to make sure that they're not getting hit by this, because it will also deal damage and knock them back. Now as I've already mentioned, you will need 2 tanks for this encounter, and this is because of an ability called Corrosive Blast. Now this Corrosive Blast, which is cast by Immerseus, will cause him to inflict a high amount of shadow damage in a frontal cone aimed at his primary target. Now this is why we keep the tanks at the back of the room out of the way, facing the boss away from the raid, because of the frontal cone, and also because you don't want your secondary tank, who at this point will be standing to the side of Immerseus so he doesn't get the debuff at the same time, is in a safe kind of area, so he isn't going to risk getting hit by the Corrosive Blast. Now this ability will cause anyone who gets hit to take 100% increased shadow damage for 45 seconds, and the debuff also stacks, so it's kind of up to your tanks to decide when they've had enough of taking too much damage and swap. I'd probably recommend on 1 or 2 stacks just to be sure. You never really know. Now finally, it's not an ability that he casts at you, but it is something to be aware of. Immerseus also has a small ability called Seeping Char, and this will cause any player that is to come into contact with the Seeping Char, which surrounds Immerseus, so within his kind of very close melee proximity, to take a moderate amount of damage and also be knocked back. So pretty much don't try and run on top of Immerseus, it's kind of stupid. So that's phase 1. It's a fairly simple phase. You just need to burn Immerseus, move out of pools, avoid the water in front of him and seeping out of the ground, and don't try and stand on top of him like an idiot. You should also keep an eye out on Immerseus' corruption bar, as this is what is key to the fight. Phase 1 and Phase 2 will rinse and repeat until his corruption level has been declined from 100 to 0. So keep that in mind while you're taking care of the puddles in Phase 2, which we're going to speak about now. Now when Immerseus reaches 0 health, he will burst, so to speak, and he will split into a range of Char puddles and Contaminator puddles. Now these puddles will be spread out around the room, and they're going to try and move back to the centre of the room in order to reform. For every Char puddle that you kill, and for each contaminated puddle that is healed to full, Immerseus' corruption level will be reduced by 1, and as I've already mentioned, when he reaches 0 corruption, he'll be fully cleansed and become friendly, so this is when the fight ends. Now when he splits, a Char puddle will be formed, and you'll get a puddle forming for every 4 units of corruption that he currently has. And if you destroy a Char puddle before it reaches the centre of the room, it will reduce Immerseus' corruption level by 1. Now you should also note that when a Char puddle is destroyed, it will trigger an ability called Char Residue, and this will inflict a moderate amount of shadow damage to everyone that's within 8 yards, and it will also give you a buff that will increase your damage dealt to other Char puddles by 25%, and this is a stacking buff. So if you get one for every 4 units at the start of the fight, there's going to be a lot of these puddles around the room. Now when Immerseus splits, he will also spawn a range of Contaminator puddles. However, he will only spawn 1 puddle for every 4 units of corruption that he has previously removed. So if you've removed 20 units of corruption, then you're going to get 5 Contaminator puddles spawning. It's kind of simple logic, really. Now you will need to heal a Contaminator puddle before it reaches the centre of the room, and doing this will cause Immerseus to lose 1 more corruption point. So the idea of this phase is to kill the Char puddles in order to reduce corruption, and to heal the Contaminator puddles in order to reduce corruption. Now as you heal the Contaminator puddles, they will begin to gain stacks of an ability called Congealing, and this will cause them to slow down quite a bit, meaning if your healing isn't very strong, you've got more time to heal them up. And I think it's for every so much percentage of health, I think it's for every 5% of health, possibly, don't quote me on this, it will lose its movement speed by 10%, so that's something to keep in mind when healing them up. Now when a puddle reaches full health, it will release an ability called Purified Residue, and this will restore 25% mana to all allies that are within 10 yards, and it will also increase their healing done by 75%, and this is a stacking buff. Now there's going to be a lot of these puddles spawning, and whenever any of these puddles reach the centre of the room, which is where Immerseus is, it will trigger an ability called Erupting Char, and this will inflict a moderate amount of shadow damage to everyone in the raid, so you need to keep in mind that as these are moving towards the centre of the room, they're going to start dealing damage to people. However, stupid amounts of excess damage can be countered by making sure you are killing the seeping Chars in time. You should also keep in mind that he has another ability called Erupting Water, and when any of the purified puddles reach Immerseus, so the Contaminator puddles that have been healed to full health, they will cause every player in the raid to also take a small amount of damage. However, this is frost damage. Not that it matters too much what type of damage it is, it's still damage on your raid, so you need to keep this in mind when puddles are reaching the centre of the room. And again, in this phase, Seeping Char will also be present, so make sure you're not trying to stand on top of Immerseus for no apparent reason, because you will take a small amount of damage and also get knocked back. So that's going to do it for this Mists of Pandaria raiding guide. All in all, Immerseus is a fairly simple fight, to be fair, and guilds shouldn't really struggle with it. There's a few abilities that you're going to have to deal with, but once you've learnt the very basics of the fight, it should be a very simple kill. Now if you would like to view a written version of this guide, you can head on over to flaskup.com in order to view it under the Raids and Siege of Orgrimmar section. And if you would also like to view our other normal mode video guides, then you can click on the on-screen annotations that should be there now in order to be taken to them. Obviously the annotations will only work if the guides are currently present. As always, thank you for watching, and if you are interested in future Mists of Pandaria raiding guides, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel.